Because when you're brand new to the business, there are some people that are like built for landlording. They tend to be bulldogs. They tend to be by the book and keeping the rules and justice. But if you're one of those really tender heart softened individuals that likes to hear the story of how they lost their job or their paycheck got lost, or they went to their grandma's funeral and that's why they're late for their rent. And if you just have that heart-wrenching disposition, landlording is very likely not for you because you're the problem. You're actually going to help perpetuate the fact that they're like, oh yeah, so-and-so's a pushover, so we're gonna pay them after we pay these less important bills, right?
Right now, I am standing in Newcastle, and the houses here, they're so cheap. They're so cheap. I mean, my man Ryan just bought this house. How much do you pay for it?
75 grand, sir.
£75,000. Where'd you buy it from?
Auction.
From an auction, and it's now to let. How much rent are you getting on this bad boy now?
We're gonna get a grand profit a month.
A grand profit. How much total rent?
2 grand.
2 grand rent. How is that possible?
So hello once again from the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. I know loads of you love me starting off my videos like that. And funnily enough, I was just actually about to record when I grabbed under my chair and it seems to be like a screw was sticking through the seat. It's actually like the second or third time I've done this. There was also like screws like coming out of like under my sink's wall. So I cut myself in that as well. But I think that fits in nicely because today we're talking about housing. More importantly, we are talking about landlords. And just like the video yesterday where we're talking about like billionaire YouTube and how basically these people have no shame in talking about what parasites to society they are. Today we're going to be talking about landlord YouTube and then transitioning from that to landlord TikTok, because landlord YouTube, while gross in its own ways, does actually have videos telling people to be like good landlords, giving like pretty generic advice about how not to screw over your tenant and be like, you know, fixing their property on time and all that stuff. But then we go to TikTok where the videos are way shorter and so many people are just bragging about being the most terrible people in society. And this isn't just me, anti-capitalist, socialist Kavernacle, saying this. Did you know there are actually lots of capitalist people throughout history, prominent capitalist people, who also hated landlords? I'm going to talk about a couple of them just before we get into the videos. So like I said, what we're going to do, first we're going to start with YouTube, start with the more like harmless videos, I guess, and then move on to TikTok where the real gross stuff really shows itself. So before we go any further, please like the video and in the comments, I guess for this kind of video, what are your landlord horror stories? Like what is just the worst thing a landlord has done to you? I'm sure people have terrible ones. We all have terrible experiences. I guess for me, I have 2 pretty bad experiences. And of course, landlords love to treat student tenants even worse than regular tenants. So in my second year of university, I remember we went home for Easter, we came back and the top cupboard over the kitchen was removed and just stuck in the bathroom. Like literally this massive cupboard was stuck in a very, very tiny bathroom, really reducing the space in that bathroom. No explanation. The only good thing, I think the landlord realised they were so bad when we withheld a lot of payments for our last one, they didn't question it. They probably knew what they'd done to us. My third year, we had an okay landlord, but then she charged me money because there was dust on the blinds when the last person left the property. I left a month before everyone else, right? She charged me 40 quid to clean the blinds. And she knew she could do it because what am I going to do? I'm going to take her to court or something? I'm going to debate this? Of course I'm not. So she just wanted to shortchange me because landlords are all bad, just like cops and just like billionaires. But let me know down in the comments. Also, if you want to support my work continuing for the future, please consider becoming a patron. I'm trying to build up as many $1 to $3 patrons as possible. But if you are a Patreon, you get access to the Discord server and my Nintendo Switch friend code. Also, I'm going to be posting one exclusive video every month about my travels. I'm currently in Vietnam, next month Cambodia, and so on. So if you care about that, consider becoming a patron. Also, check out the subreddit, check out my second channel, and if you want to follow me on social media, at the Kavernacle on Twitter and on Instagram, and Instagram is where I'm posting most of my content about Vietnam. I have my highlights on my profile, so if you want to check out what I've been doing, go there and have a look. So I guess like yesterday where I gave a brief summary of how I feel about billionaires, I guess I should talk about landlords too. So all landlords are bad in my opinion, all landlords are immoral. This includes mom and pop landlords. I've seen that term being thrown around. People who only have like 1 or 2 extra properties which they rent out. And there's so much wrong with being a landlord, but I guess it really boils down to is housing is something everybody needs, right? Everybody needs a place to stay. Everybody needs a place to live the same way that everyone needs food, everyone needs water, all that stuff, right? But people treat it way differently. And I hate the term that I'm going to get into real estate. Like I was watching a Fillion video a couple months ago, and what struck me was this one girl who was working on like TikTok stuff. She was saying, I'm hoping to get into real estate.
This funny moment, it didn't look like it was actually gonna happen, where Donald Trump's like, I'm gonna ban TikTok.
Yeah, I remember that.
Like, pretend that happened. What would you do?
Well, personally, I want to get into real estate and I want to start a few of my own businesses. So this was never like my main focus.
But for some people,
I'm concerned for them.
Like it's something very normal. Like you want to buy property so you can price gouge people who need a place to live and extort them essentially. So if you're a landlord, you're being a parasite, you're getting other people to pay off your own mortgage and potentially make a profit from their monthly payments. And presumably, once the mortgage is paid off, you're going to kick the tenants out and you're going to sell that house. And that can just be a landlord who owns one property. But then you have landlords who brag about owning hundreds of properties. You have slumlords like the Kushner family, and they feel like this is a very moral thing to do. It's an investment. It's no different than a stock or creating your own business. You know, having a monopoly on housing, jacking up the price of housing to increase your profits when you know desperate people are going to pay that because they need to live somewhere or they potentially will go homeless. It's a completely gross system. And like I said, there are no good landlords. And in theory, you can have a good landlord in terms of like he's more responsive, maybe he's more understanding of economic conditions, he doesn't raise the rent just because of market value, which I've seen thrown around a lot, but at the end of the day, you're still paying his mortgage, you're still making him a profit, and you're still going to pay off that house that he will eventually sell. There are so many problems with being a landlord, and someone you've seen me collab with before is Amy C3, who's a Twitch streamer who is basically like an expert in housing. And I'd recommend anyone go check out Amy's streams because she talks about this a lot more in depth than I do. And also she has far better knowledge about public housing and landlords and all that stuff. So if you care about any of this stuff and want someone who has the specific knowledge, please go check out her Twitch stream. And also you can check out the video me and her did together on my channel about the philanthropy of Mr. Beast and Brad Pitt. So moving on from my opinion of that, did you know Adam Smith, the father of modern capitalism, and Winston Churchill, imperialist supreme, both hated landlords? It's not just Mao who's very famous for hating landlords. It's these two capitalists and colonialists. So let's get into some quotes from Winston Churchill and Adam Smith about how much they hated landlords to prove to any of you capitalists out there that you don't necessarily, just because you're a capitalist, have to love the parasites that are landlords. So Chairman Mao, Winston Churchill said, "Roads are made, streets are made, railway services are improved, electric lights turn night into day, electric trams glide swiftly to and fro, water is brought from reservoirs 100 miles off in the mountains, and all while the landlord sits still. Every one of those improvements is affected by labour and the cost of other people. Many of the most important are affected at the cost of municipality and of the ratepayers. To not one of those improvements does the land monopolist, as a land monopolist, contribute, and yet by every one of them the value of his land is sensibly enhanced. He renders no service to the community, he contributes nothing to the general welfare, he contributes nothing even to the process from which his own enrichment is derived, and all the while the land monopolist has to only sit still and watch complacently his property multiplying in value, sometimes manifold, without either effort or contribution on his part, and that is justice." So obviously Winston Churchill is talking about this from a more like capitalist perspective of like capitalist development, but I do find it funny because he's recognizing how this guy's land and houses will increase in value just because of the work of everyone else in developing an area, just showing how parasitic landlords are generally. But on Adam Smith's subreddit, they've also got a couple of quotes from Adam Smith, mainly from The Wealth of Nations, but also just from Smith himself. So The Wealth of Nations: "The rent of the land, therefore, considered as the price paid for the use of the land, is naturally a monopoly price. It's not at all proportioned to what the landlord may have laid out upon the improvement of the land or to what he can afford to take, but to what the farmer can afford to give. Another quote, as soon as the land of any country has all become private property, the landlords, like all other men, love to reap what they never sowed and demand a rent even for its natural produce. The landlord leaves the worker with the smallest share with which the tenant can content himself without being a loser, and the landlord seldom means to leave him any more. The landlord demands a rent even for unimproved land, like Churchill was saying, and the supposed interest or profit upon the expense of improvement is generally an addition to his original rent. Those improvements, besides, are not always made by the stock of the landlord, but sometimes by that of the tenant. When the lease comes to be renewed, however, the landlord commonly demands the same augmentation of rent as if they had been all made by his own. Landlords are the only one of the three orders whose revenue costs them neither labour nor care, but comes to them, as it were, of its own accord, and independent of any plan or project of their own. That indolence, which is the natural effect of ease and the security of their situation, renders them too often not only ignorant, but incapable of that application of mind. So from Winston Churchill to Adam Smith to Mao, something they could all agree on was landlords are lazy, landlords are parasites, landlords do not earn their profit in any way. So again, not just crazy socialist Kavernacle, not crazy socialist Mao Zedong, Churchill and Adam Smith also agree with us. So now I want to get into Landlord YouTube before going into Landlord TikTok. So there's a guy called Chris Crone, I think, who has loads of videos about being rich and successful, you know, being an entrepreneur. We covered kind of his stuff yesterday as well. But he makes an interesting video about how to be a landlord and how to do it the right way. And like many of these videos, give advice about how to be a good landlord, don't be an inconvenience, fix your tenants' properties, all that stuff, and be professional. But then there are just some interesting clips within these helpful videos which reveal the mindset of landlords a bit more. So I want to play this one first and maybe one more afterwards.
So remember, if you want to be a landlord, number one, put the right people in the house. Okay. Rule number two, how lenient of a landlord are you? Okay, because when you're brand new to the business, there's some people that are like built for landlording. They tend to be bulldogs. They tend to be by the book and keeping the rules and justice. But if you're one of those really tender heart softened individuals that likes to hear the story of how they lost their job or their paycheck got lost, or you know, they went to their grandma's funeral and that's why they're late for their rent. And if you just have that heart-wrenching disposition, landlording is very likely not for you, because you're the problem. You're actually going to help perpetuate the fact that they're like, oh yeah, so-and-so's a pushover, so we're gonna pay them after we pay these less important bills, right? And so you've got to have a strong stomach. The moment you start creating a room for any kind of leniency, I promise you, in 99% of the situations, they're going to come back and they're going to start taking advantage of that. They're going to start leveraging that against their own game, because when you're tight on money, and by the way, understand that most people are. So what that means at the end of the day is they're trying to figure out, who can I push? They know with their cell phone, if they're late and they don't pay it, guess what happens? Their cell phone gets turned off. Guess what happens if they don't pay their electricity bill? It gets shut off. But guess what happens when they're late on their rent? No big deal. They're going to give me 5 extra days. They're not even going to impose the late fees. Listen, this is a business, and if you don't treat it like one, I'm just telling you, there's people out there that are going to mess with you. And it's not even because they're trying to. It's not because they're bad-natured. It's just that when things are tight, they want to know, when push comes to shove, who's firm and who's soft. Rule number 2, do not be a soft property manager. It will establish a habit, and I promise you, in most cases, you're going to start seeing a repeat problem show up. And I want you to understand that in that situation, if you're watching this and you're a landlord, you're like, gulp, I'm kind of guilty of that. You are the problem in this.
So isn't that a fascinating insight into the landlord mind, in that showing compassion, being lenient, and even this guy here recognizing people do fall in hard times. This isn't someone who's just trying to cheat you out of rent because they just don't want to pay and they want to keep money for themselves for like frivolous things, or just to, you know, buy video games or something. This is a guy who recognizes that some people just might be choosing what bills they can or cannot pay that month, or based on a certain time frame. And he's saying, you're the part of the problem. If you're lenient, then you're a bad landlord. You're bad for everyone else. You're bad for the business. And if you show some leniency, then the bad tenant will keep taking advantage of you. He won't be grateful. And I love how they frame it as the tenant is bad. Bro, That tenant is paying your mortgage. You are profiting off their need for housing. You are the bad guy in the situation. You are the parasite. The least you could do if you're a landlord is be lenient, is be compassionate, is not be a bulldog, as this guy says some of the best landlords are. This isn't even a bad video about landlords, and I'm getting heated because of this ridiculous mindset and entitled mindset these people have. So there's another video that's just like this, talking about like the best ways to be a good landlord, and I just find part of how this guy describes being like lenient and stuff quite funny. So let's have a look at this clip next.
Now, given that, it's also important that you have your own boundaries between yourself and the tenant. With the exception of one scenario where I ended up renting out a house to a close friend, keeping things professional between you and your tenant makes it much easier to make business-minded decisions first. When renting to a friend, the line gets blurred and it becomes much more difficult to distinguish between the business and the friendship. For example, if you have to raise the rents, are you simply just a friend, or are you just following the market rates? If you end up charging your friend a late fee because they didn't pay on time, now are you not only a friend, but you're also greedy? Or if there's a violation on the lease agreement and it's not corrected, are you really going to evict a friend and be that guy that evicts a friend and ruins a friendship because of money? So there's a very fine distinction there when this needs to be run like a business. I would say in 95% of situations, renting to friends or family just already complicates a delicate situation to begin with. So you gotta make it very clear. Stick with the contract, keep it professional, and also treat it like a business.
So just a small clip there of kind of like the same kind of video. And something that I love so much is that he's making a distinction between being a bad friend and following the market rates for rent, right? Like those two things are separate. If you rent to your friend and then you up the rent just based on market rates, then yes, you're a shit friend, because why are you raising that guy's rent? Just to make more profit based on how much people are profiting off other tenants in the area, but he's still paying your mortgage. He might even still be giving you a profit monthly, but you're acting like it'd be totally fine to just raise his rent price based on the market value. And that always makes me laugh. Like, landlords act like, I have no choice. The market value. Everyone around here is paying more rent, so I have to do it too. I'm so sorry about that. No, you're doing it because you're fucking greedy. You're doing it because you want more profit and you feel like you're missing out on more profit and more payment of your mortgage. You're not doing it because someone is forcing you. These guys are so entitled, and it makes me so depressed that this guy has like 4 million subs. These videos have so many thousands of views at the same time. Are we just too far gone as a society? Is this just a Western problem? Is this just American and a British problem where they're so brainwashed by the cult of neoliberalism? There is no shame in saying stuff like this. They feel like they're giving great advice here. They feel like they're pretty moral in this situation. And I'm just like, how can you even live with yourself when you are doing this to people? I think being a landlord is one of the most immoral things that your average person can become. And these guys aren't even the worst of it. And that's what we're gonna get into next. Let's get into landlord TikTok. Now, I know Noah Sampson made a video talking about landlord TikTok. Surprisingly, I haven't actually watched that. So if there's any crossover with the people I'm watching here and the people he's covered, it's just a coincidence based on the most horrible landlord TikTokers there are. So I just want to go through a couple random ones I found before focusing on like very specific TikTok creators and reacting to the stuff they say. And also some of them have kind of clapped back at communists criticizing them, so that's always fun. So let's have a look at the first couple. So something I've seen going around is something called house hacking, which means you live for free, apparently. I wonder what this house hacking is. Here is Sarah Finance, 19-year-old landlord, explaining it for me.
Okay, so I'm going to explain how I'm living for free as a 19-year-old. So how it works is I own a house with 3 bedrooms. I live in one of the bedrooms and I rent out the other 2 bedrooms for each $850 every single month, and so that's $1,700 each month. So that money covers the entire mortgage, and this is called house hacking, so I basically live for free.
So again, this person is 19 and thinks this is living for free. So exploiting people's need for housing by renting them out bedrooms for hundreds of dollars a month just to pay your mortgage. You're a parasite. You're a parasite. This isn't house hacking. This isn't living for free. You are profiting off people's need for a basic necessity so you don't have to do anything. You can kind of see why Adam Smith hated landlords. Father of Capitalism, he thinks you got to work for your money. These people don't work for their money. They just might have inherited property from, you know, a dead relative or something like that, or inherited a lot of money where they've bought a property and then they exploit people's basic needs so they can live a life of luxury and freedom at 19 years old. This isn't an aspiration for people. This isn't a good thing. This person is a bad person. No matter what else they do with their life, they're a bad person for exploiting people. So one more random ass TikTok I found, and this is like so illegal on many levels. I'm gonna play some other song because they're playing that some licensed music, but have a look at this one. Oh my god, she's so petty. She's stealing her tenants' literal belongings because she is late on her rent. See how entitled landlords are? Do they not understand the difference between, I don't know, buying some random stuff on Amazon and paying like maybe over $1,000 in rent? Like, is there a difference between that? She doesn't know what that person is buying. It could be stuff they really, really need. And obviously tenants are also protected by the law in many circumstances. But again, landlords feel entitled to your money. Despite being the most parasitic people, even in a capitalist economy, their entitlement is insane. Their entitlement to your money, their entitlement to jack up the prices to unaffordable levels for housing, for bedrooms even, and then do stuff like this. So this guy is kind of like the inspiration for the video. And we've been covering like some American people, but here is a British guy. He's called Samuel Leeds and he has 160,000 followers on TikTok. His average views aren't so good, but he does have a lot of viral ones. He makes me laugh a lot, but he is just like insanely annoying that you're thinking about how much money this guy is making from exploitation. So I want to go through a few of his TikTok. So at the start, he kind of has these ones where it's like he's talking to some random guy to explain like why he's so good and why he's so knowledgeable. So let's have a look at a couple of these.
How much was your house? Oh, this one? It was free.
Yeah, right.
I used a lease option agreement.
A lease what?
It's where you buy a house now with the option to pay for it in 7 years' time.
Well, you still got to pay for it then.
Well, over the 7 years, you can use all the rental income you've made as the deposit to buy the house. This one almost doubled after its 7 years.
I'm following you to learn more about property. Should I buy or rent my house?
To become rich, you gotta rent.
But I've saved up this 100k deposit to buy this nice house.
Instead, use that £100,000 to buy 3 cheap houses to rent out.
Explain?
You can use the rental income from those 3 houses to rent your own home, which will be a much nicer house than that one you were gonna buy.
Oh, that's genius.
Plus, you'll end up owning 3 houses.
I'm following to learn more about property.
So what do you even say to stuff like that? I know this isn't like the worst TikTok he's made, but telling people to basically ponce off other people by buying up cheap homes and jacking up the rent prices to pay for your own luxury house, again, that should be the aspiration for someone. That should be someone being smart. Like, yeah, people can play this rigged system, and he's talking about like lease agreements and stuff like that, to make more money. But, you know, morally, this isn't okay, is it? Like, these guys always play a rigged system designed by people like them, for people like them, and then promote it like, yeah, this is a good thing. Make money by exploiting people. Very, very good. Buy up free homes in poor areas and jack up the prices, which can have a knock-on effect of jacking up the prices all over a poorer area just so you can make more money. And this is something this guy constantly tells people to do. He tells people to go to Northern England, which is historically a poorer part of England than the South, and go there, buy property for cheap, jack up the prices. Because like we've already seen that landlords do, they see the other prices rising in the area and they're like, well, I'm going to do that too, because I could just not do that because I'm already a parasite, don't want to be a bigger one. But I'm just going to follow market trends. I'm just going to raise your rent for no reason, even though you are paying off my mortgage already.
Right now, I am standing in Newcastle, and the houses here, they're so cheap. They're so cheap. I mean, my man Ryan just bought this house. How much do you pay for it?
75 grand, sir.
£75,000. Where'd you buy it from?
Auction.
From an auction, and it's now to let. How much rent are you getting on this bad boy now?
We're gonna get a grand profit a month.
A grand profit? How much total rent?
2 grand.
2 grand rent. How is that possible? When you buy it for 75 grand, well, they bought it for 75 grand, and they're renting it out per room. There are 5 rooms. Each room's renting out for £400. 400 times 5 is 2,000. He's budgeted for all the costs, so he knows he's going to be left with £1,000 a month profit. But here's the really cool thing. You bought it for 75 grand.
Yeah.
You refurbished it. How much did you spend on the refurb?
45.
45, that's 120 in total. What's the new value?
145.
145. So he's refinanced it, pulling out most of his money, now renting out, making £1,000 a month. Boom! Newcastle rocks.
Newcastle rocks because it's cheaper than the south, and you can do stuff like this. You can charge people £400 a month in a 5-bedroom place. They're also sharing the kitchen, sharing the bathroom. I don't know how many, showers and bathrooms are in this place. And they're saying this is good. You should do this. If you're smart, you will do this. You will go into poor communities with lots of your money and you will make this place a bit nicer and then just exploit people for profit. And obviously a lot of you are watching that and you're like, these people are disgusting. But then doesn't it speak so much to our society that these people don't only do this, they don't do this in the shadows because they're so ashamed of how immoral it is. They do it, then celebrate it on TikTok and publish about how good they are and hope to go viral and everyone see what they've done because they think they are so smart. A newsflash to a lot of rich people and landlords, you aren't so smart because you've done this. You don't know things that everyone else doesn't know. You're just shitty people. We know a lot of the stuff you're telling us. We know we could do this if we got enough capital. We just wouldn't do this. If I have enough money for a house, I'm just going to buy that house and I'm going to live in it because I don't desire to own property, which I'm then going to make people pay off my own mortgage for and hopefully make me a profit. What kind of psycho do you have to be? But because of neoliberal capitalism, I reckon more people think this guy has done something good and smart rather than agree with me, which is really sad. Also considering that Winston Churchill and Adam Smith also agree with me. Follow YouTubers who Mao, Adam Smith and Winston Churchill would all agree with. So these two lovely gentlemen are actually at it again in Newcastle. This time, the other guy in the background has bought a pub. I think this might have been filmed on the same day. So let's see how they talk about buying a pub in Newcastle.
Now I'm standing in Newcastle. You can buy houses in Newcastle for about £100,000. These houses are about 100 grand. However, my man Ryan, you just bought a pub.
Yes, sir.
How much do you pay for this rundown pub?
130 grand.
So he bought a rundown pub for £130,000. Now here's the crazy thing. He's done it up. He's turned it into, what you turned it into?
5 flats and an 8-bed HMO.
5 2-bed flats and an 8-bed HMO, which is going to mean he split it all up. So you're going to rent it out, make a nice profit. How much clean profit are you going to make?
35 grand net a year.
35 grand net clean profit. He got a bridging loan and then he renovated it. He's done it really nice. You can see the standard. These rooms are beautiful, all ensuite rooms. So he's going to make 35 grand a year. However, the bridging loan was 240 grand. Did it all up. What's the new valuation?
700 grand.
700 grand. So you've made £250,000.
Yeah.
He made £250,000. Pull all his money out, make 35 grand a year. Oh my goodness.
So yeah, going into poorer communities and converting old pubs into really shit flats, which again will have a knock-on effect of jacking up the prices for rent across the area because all the greedy landlords will probably see the prices on these places and be like, well, I can get away with this too. Attract more people to come to these parts of Newcastle, gentrify poorer communities more. And these people are not creating value. And that's why it's so frustrating that in countries like the UK and in the US, people buying up property and doing stuff like this, the regulations are just so scarce about them. This is incentivized, this is allowed by the government. And again, people should not be allowed to own this many properties. That guy behind the main TikToker, right? Think about all the property he now owns in just Newcastle from these 2 TikToks. Do you think he has more property than this? So how much property does this guy actually own? And how is that allowed? And how is that ethical? And that's the problem. Even if you think, someone can have a holiday home and they could rent that out, surely you can accept that going into poorer communities and going into poorer parts of the country when you're probably from down south and doing this is a bad thing and should not be allowed. You shouldn't be able to make so much profit off basic necessities for people and buying up places and dividing them into even smaller properties to increase your profit even more. Now, don't worry, Stephen Leeds has heard us communists and he has heard us saying about public housing. He has seen our comments calling him a parasite and he's actually responded to us as well. So let's have a look at this TikTok. This one's pretty funny.
Abolishing landlordism means transferring ownership from the landlord class to the public.
What this guy is rooting for is actually communism, which says that the people shouldn't have property, the people shouldn't own stuff, the people shouldn't have money. We should take all the money off of the rich and give it to the all-wise, all-knowing government and let them just look after everybody and distribute it fairly. Name one country where that's ever worked. There is none.
So obviously this guy doesn't have any significant rebuttal to communist ideology about the people owning stuff and maybe through the mechanism of the state and public housing, which is pretty common in socialist states, obviously happened in the Soviet Union. Everyone likes to meme about public housing in the Soviet Union, but in this capitalist hellscape we're living in, those Soviet apartments are actually looking pretty good now. It's probably not surprising that so many older Russians miss the Soviet Union when you have people like Stephen here taking over Russia and taking over the UK. And it's funny, he's acting like the government is really, really bad and we shouldn't trust them, which is probably true in the UK. But then is the alternative that I'm meant to trust parasitic landlords like you to own and run all the property? Like, is that the good solution? I'd much rather have housing managed by people from the Soviet Union than ran by parasitic capitalists like you, Stephen. And also it makes me laugh because it's pretty clear that although landlords have no shame, they also want to be liked, and they get very, very upset when people call them out for being parasites. And you see this all the time in like landlord subreddits and forums. Like, they get very mad when tenants stand up for themselves or, you know, utilize tenant unions to not be exploited even more than they already are. So Stephen, I am looking forward to the day that the communists in England take over, and I cannot wait to seize all your property and make it into public housing for poorer people. So apparently this is one of the most infamous landlords on TikTok, called Tom Cruise, and Amy C3 actually recommended me check out this guy. I didn't have enough time to research a lot of what he was talking about properly, but I did stumble across one TikTok which is interesting and kind of connects to yesterday's video, in that these people think they're oh so clever for being even bigger parasites than they already are by making people pay their mortgage. They also love to explain how they actually take taxpayers' money through the government to enrich themselves. And this was happening with some of the videos yesterday, but let's have a look at this one TikTok.
You live in America without telling me you live in America.
I'm going to show you the beauty of America in less than 30 seconds. Let's get it. Only in America can I buy this house for $80,000, get a $360 mortgage with a conventional loan backed by the federal government, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, USDA loans. And then I'm going to turn around and rent it for $1,300 to Section 8, which is a federally backed program. So not only is the federal government backing the loan that I'm using to buy this property, they're then turning around and paying me with federal funds to rent the property for Section 8. And I keep the difference. It's called Section 8 arbitrage. Probably the best way you can make money in rental properties. Highly recommend.
So this is the reason why the guy loves America. He can essentially find loopholes to steal taxpayer money to enrich himself, where he can buy an $80,000 home from the federal government on a mortgage of $360 a month, then rent it back to the federal government at a massive markup and make loads of money, doing no work on it, providing no benefit to society, just taking the government loans and doing what he pleases to enrich himself. And if that isn't America in a nutshell, I don't know what else is. Of course, you know, I come from the UK, I can't really talk about many of these things. In these neoliberal hellholes we live in, it seems that both governments are very happy to give out loans for crap like this, for rich people to enrich themselves even more. And this guy is one of the most smug. And again, if I was doing this, right, if I was doing all the little shifty things these people were doing, if I was buying up loads of property and massively jacking up rental prices, especially in poorer areas, I would probably feel a tiny bit of shame, maybe a tiny bit of guilt, even though I'm like, oh, this is so easy. You know, if everyone knew this, they'd all do it. I wouldn't go on TikTok and start bragging about it, trying to become famous, trying to become viral, talking about, you know, how great I am for doing this. Like he's showing there, doesn't seem like a very hard thing to do. Would you do it watching this right now? Would you do what he just did? I wouldn't do it. I'm guessing a lot of people with my politics wouldn't do it. Because you're a good person, because you're a moral person, you don't want to steal taxpayer money to enrich yourself. You don't want to own a property where someone else is paying your mortgage, and at the end of the day, you're going to kick them out and sell the house at a massive profit because you're a good person who doesn't believe basic necessities must be used for profit. Same way that you believe that, you know, everyone should have access to water, everyone should have access to food, everyone should have access to healthcare, everyone should have access to housing. So overall, that was kind of just like a little taste of this landlord YouTube TikTok ecosystem. And although it's funny to like meme on these people, because a lot of them are pretty ridiculous, I think it's such an indictment of our society that these people even feel emboldened to go on social media and talk like this. Like, especially the TikTok people. It just makes my blood boil, and I just try to imagine, like, what kind of country do you grow up in where this is acceptable, where this is incentivized even, and you get people in America, young people want to make money, talk about getting into real estate, like you aren't buying up homes to profit off people's need for basic necessities. Like, what kind of society do we now live in that this is acceptable? And how have we changed so much from even Adam Smith, the father of modern capitalism, and Winston Churchill, this terrible imperialist, these are people who can recognize landlords are parasites. You don't have to be like Mao. You don't have to be like me. Just general capitalists and imperialists recognized this back in the day, hundreds of years ago. And now we have a society where these people feel like bragging about this is good. They want to become famous for being landlords and get very pressured when the rest of us say, well, you're parasites, contribute something to society. But these people love to not pay tax. And obviously a big thing about buying property is all the tax loopholes. These people don't have to pay tax. This guy is literally using taxpayer money to enrich himself. And when you live in a capitalist hellhole that would have Adam Smith turning in his grave, I think you know capitalism has gone way too far. Even if you are a capitalist, if you're a libertarian, if you're someone who subscribes to the work of Adam Smith or something like that, you know as well our society has gone off the deep end with this capitalist cult of neoliberalism. So that is it for the video. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching.